Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. I would love to talk about the Dirt Gems Oracle deck today. I hope that you will not hear my neighbor mowing their lawn too loudly. I don't know if the microphone's going to pick that up, but I'm going to do my best and hopefully that won't come through. This is a deck that I had on my radar for such a long time, but I didn't purchase it right off the bat because I just tend to not use Oracle decks as much. And I'm trying to be more mindful in the things that I purchase and actually trying to make sure that they're things that I'm going to use. So I purchased the first edition of this deck, and I'd posted it on my Instagram a little bit, and then Chelsea Grainger, one of the creators, reached out to me and offered to send me the second edition copy of the deck. And I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about the differences and just kind of generally talk about this deck. I'm not going to do a full flip through, those already exist, but there have been significant improvements to the second edition of the deck, and I think it would be, good to talk about it. Plus, I just really like talking about this deck because I really think this is a style of art that I love so much. So first I'm going to just show a little bit of the differences between the first edition deck and the second edition deck. Then I'll kind of talk about the books a little bit as well. So the first edition of the deck did have a two-part box. It's, reasonably sturdy box. And the second edition has a much sturdier two-part box. Both two-part boxes. The first edition doesn't have a thumb cutout on the side, so it's a little hard to open. When it's all the way closed, it's a little hard to kind of get it going and get it opened. These are standard tarot size cards, even though it is an Oracle deck. One of the things I noticed in my first edition deck is that there was always a card getting stuck in the bottom, I think because of the way the folds happen inside the box. So I took a card that I just had like an extra tarot card and stuck it in the bottom of the box. And now that card gets stuck and the entire deck comes out for me. So if you have a first edition copy of this deck and that happens to you and you have an extra card laying around, that helped me a lot with this. Move that out of the way. This is the first edition. The second edition has a thumb cutout. It's actually a sturdier two-part box. And so when you go to open it, it opens up very easily. It's got very pretty illustrations inside, whereas the first edition didn't have illustrations inside. Just a nice little extra touch. It's just very pretty. And there's also some illustrations in the bottom of the second edition. One of the major things you see right away between the two editions is that the second edition has a really pretty gold gilded edge. It's also just very slightly smaller over, on the width, and very slightly smaller on the height. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this and show it to you. I might have to take but yeah, you can see it's got just, maybe a 1/4 inch, very minimal. The cardstock itself, between the first edition and the second edition just feels a little bit, I don't know, firmer maybe for lack of a better word. I do think they're pretty close to the same, can you see that? Yeah, they're pretty close to the same height, thickness, but these cards feel a little more flexible and these cards feel a little firmer and maybe a little more sturdy. Definitely more sturdy. Again, I don't really think there's any significant difference in the thickness, but this just bends way more easily. This still bends, but it gives a little more resistance. You get a little more resistance on this side. Look at that nettle card. Isn't that amazing? The artwork on this deck is absolutely incredible. And that's one of the reasons every time I would see somebody post with this deck on Instagram, I was like, I gotta get that deck, I gotta get that deck. And then I'm like, no, maybe you don't need to get that deck because you don't really read with Oracle decks that much and blah, 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 blah. But eventually it was too much. The FOMO was too much for me. And I think this is just an absolutely amazing deck. The backs are different on the first and the second edition. I like them. I mean, I like them both. They're both really good. I'm going to put the the first edition aside now and just kind of flip through at least a little bit of the first edition. I guess what I can also do really quick is show you how it shuffles, because it does, I can get quite a nice rifle shuffle out of that. It overhands fine. I'm not a huge overhand shuffle fan. This is an interesting cardstock because it has a sort of, it has a matte finish, and the first edition has, more of a standard finish, not high gloss, but not matte. And the first edition, also shuffles fine. I have no problems with it whatsoever at all. The second edition has a slightly, I don't want to call it rose petal. I don't think it quite is. Rose petal, I always have problems with shuffling it, especially overhand. It tends to stick and clump really badly. And I don't really find that to be the case here. It shuffles very smoothly. So maybe this is more like, more on the matte side of a card finish. In any event, I cannot say enough good things about this deck in general, but especially the second edition. I feel like, and I wasn't there from the beginning, but I feel like this could very well be a situation where people got their decks, gave some feedback, and the creators went and made a second edition and took that feedback and made it better. I mean, the box is better. The cardstock seems a bit better. The finish is better. Some people might like, the edging better also. I'm not a huge fan of the very shiny edgings, but I do think that over time and with more use, these can tend to wear to a nice, slightly more muted kind of effect over time. And I do use this deck quite often, even though it's an Oracle deck and that's not the first thing I tend to reach for. I cannot even tell you how amazing this deck is for like spring and summer, and, pulling cards with this when I don't know, sometimes I'm in just kind of like that kind of vibe. I mean, I'm a very much like a herbalist, like a plant person, and this, I don't know if I want to call it, is it kind of like more like a folk art style? I adore this kind of art style. I just think it's so lovely. And some of the cards are black and white. And obviously, my favorite stuff is like the very bright color of these cards. And some of these, I'm trying to see if I can find some of my favorites that I can show. I mean, a lot of them are my favorites. I think the anemone, absolutely beautiful. Holy basil, another one that's like such a gorgeous, gorgeous card. We passed nettle earlier. Nettle is one of my absolute favorite cards in this deck. It is just like a sight to behold. Look at Elder though. It's like this like really pretty, like a midnight blue with the white illustration on top. I just think that's so I would love to, like, I'm not this talented, but like if I was more talented to be able to make patterns, I would love to like embroider that. Like, I just think that would be such a pretty embroidery pattern. That's where my mind goes on that one. Black walnut is, and I have a black walnut tree. It's actually technically in my neighbor's yard, but it overreaches my yard, so we get black walnuts every year. And this card I just think it's so like, it's almost like the creators of this deck, I feel like they were actually like really in tune with the plants that they were drawing. I feel like they were really, I don't know. I know I know I'm very woo-woo, but I feel like they were picking up on something maybe outside themselves. This is a really beautifully drawn and colored and just created deck. Hawthorne's another one that I love with the beautiful butterflies. But probably if I had to pick a favorite card, I think the Nettle card is one of my favorites. Passion, I mean, they really all are. Like they're just so pretty. So I want to talk a little bit about the books, because this deck does come with a full-on guidebook, and it has a lot of good information about the plants. The first edition of the guidebook is the one over here. When I bought this deck, the first edition was kind of on its way out, and I bought this from a site online, like a shop online, and I think it was kind of like their last stock of the first editions before they started to bring in second editions. And it arrived, and it had a little bit of damage to it, but it is what it is. I wasn't too, concerned about that, to be honest. I don't think there's a huge amount of difference between any of the text. I mean, not that I noticed in the time that I had used the first edition book to the time I really have kind of put this away now, and I'm using the second edition. But I don't really think there's major differences to the content itself. But I do feel like the second edition book, it feels like it's going to be a little more sturdier. The binding feels like it's going to be a little more sturdy. And this first edition book has like a matte finish, and the second edition book, it's also fairly matte, but they feel different. This almost feels a little more like a rose petal. But what I like so much about, there's a postcard. What I like so much about the book is that it really goes into some information about the plant itself, and then it gives, I'm casting a shadow on it, but it gives information about like how you would, use it in a divinatory way. So the nice thing about this book, I guess what I'm trying to say, is that you get a bit of plant information. You learn a little bit about the plants itself, and then you've also got information to, use it as an oracle deck and use it in a divinatory sense. I'm trying to remember, it's been a little while since I was in here. It does have some spreads, so it's got some background on the deck. It's got some information on the suits. This actually does have 4 different suits. So it does have like a fire suit, water, earth, and air. Like a tarot deck, but obviously it's an oracle deck. And the cards, let me find them here. The cards are numbered, so it's easy to find the card that you want within the book. So instead of being like 1 through 15 in each of the suits, it's just a continuous numbering system. So if you pull card number 36, it's going to be easy enough to find. Oh, you know what? That's the one thing I was going to note about this. I do wish that the number of the card was here at the top, but it's actually down here. So if you're looking for card number 36, you might be thinking, oh, I'll look up here by the title, but you actually have to look at the image of the card, which is, again, no big deal. It's just, in my mind, I'm thinking that I would be looking for it up here, but it's down here. So if you want to find card number 36, they're all in order. It's very easy to find it. Some books are not as easy to use when you're looking for the meaning of your card, but this one is, it's fine. So it's got, again, a little bit more background, and then it's got several different spreads. I like this root to seed spread. I think it's actually got, I tend to use like very small. Usually I don't pull more than 3 cards at a time, but I've used this root to seed spread a few times. And I actually really like this. This covers, how do I want to put it? It covers all the facets of what, you know, I think I might want to know when I am doing a spread and pulling more cards. So I like that one a lot. Yeah, I am so happy that I did go ahead and grab a copy of this deck, because I was worried that I might not reach for it as much because it's an Oracle deck, but in fact, I actually reached for it a lot. I was using it a ton, especially like early in the spring, as we are getting into spring here. Our snow is thawing out, and we have a lot of early plants, you know, and some of those are in here. A lot of these plants are things I have in my yard. I have nettle, I grow aloe, like I have grown clary sage. I don't have any out there right now, but like I have irises. Like so much of this stuff, there's some things in here that are different, plants that I maybe didn't know about as much, but there's also a lot of plants that I'm very familiar with, either from the things I grow in my garden or the things that I see when I'm out hiking. Yet another one that's like basically in my yard. The black walnuts drop in my yard every year. So it's just kind of nice in that sense that you've got some stuff that's very common. You'll see it all around your neighborhood, or like again in your area if you go hiking. But and I'm in the northeast of the US, by the way, so I'm sure that, you know, some of that is perhaps regional, but like I grow St. John's wort, like I grow calendula, like so much of this stuff is familiar to me. But then there were things like, I forget where it was, like anemone. I didn't really know much about that until I got this deck. There's things like within here that I just wasn't as familiar with. So it's allowed me to see the things that I have all around me, but it's also allowed me to learn some new plants. And I'm always up for learning about new plants. I hope this has been helpful. There are, you know, this is a deck that's been out for a little while, so you know, there are other videos, I think like full walkthroughs and you know, other discussions and stuff like that. But I just think that this is a deck that it's really, really nice for this time of year. And if you are a person who is just into plants in general, who's into herbalism, who's into using plants for like magical purposes and stuff like that, you might really connect with this deck. This deck, I connected with it right away. It really helped spark my intuition. So I hope this has been helpful. If anyone has any questions or comments, you can please leave them below. I will link the creator's Instagram, and I will also link to the deck. And if you, you know, want to pop on my Instagram and see some more photos of it, there are some there. And you can also just say hey. Thanks very much and have a wonderful day.